I'll just start by introducing myself a little bit, and then we'll pass it over to Catherine to take it away. So hello, everyone, and welcome. My name is Day Hagel. I'm the Director of Mental Health Wilderness First Aid. And so what we do is we run courses on basic mental health first aid skills for folks who live, work, or play out in wilderness and remote areas. So we have a lot of search and rescue folks come through, a lot of First Nations, outdoor educators, kayak guides, tree planters, lots of different kind of contingents of folks, but the common factors seem to be remote areas and interest in supporting mental health, especially from more of like a layperson's perspective. So we're very excited to welcome Catherine here tonight. Catherine and I don't know each other super well, but we do have a close friend and a colleague of mine, Jeremy Adelman, in common. And for folks who might be super familiar with our guest speakers, we had Jeremy Adelman come through last year and do a guest speaker event for us on Somatic Experiencing Therapy and some of his experiences outdoors in nature as well. He's an avid hiker and hunter and dog trainer and that kind of thing. So Jeremy and Catherine have done some work and studies together through the Somatic Experiencing Program, and I'll let Catherine share a little bit about what that might be. But I'll also just welcome Catherine. Thank you so much for sharing your time and your experience and your background with us tonight. And I'll just read Catherine's bio to introduce her, and then Catherine, you can fill in any blanks, and we'll go from there. Okay. So Catherine, this is Catherine's words. I'm just going to read out what you sent me earlier, Catherine. She says, "My interest in trauma from the physical aspect was sparked when I trained as a registered nurse and worked in various hospitals and the Arctic for 24 years. Soon after graduation from nursing, I trained as a Rolfer, which is structural integration. Maybe you can explain a little bit more about that at some point, which supports physical manipulation and movement education to allow the body to be at ease in gravity. Often a poor posture occurs when a person adapts to physical or emotional management to avoid pain or discomfort. Very often the person may have muscle tension, and I was noticing from my own history and that of others, what was currently being offered in support less pain in the body was not actually being effective. So after 16 years of part-time rolfing, I began to study somatic experiencing as my interest in how trauma affects the nervous system and supports the body to survive long after the traumatic experience has passed. But the body may remain determined to keep you safe and alive by building up what might be seen as a negative trait or behavior, but is really a coping mechanism that kept you alive in the moment and continues. This gave me a great understanding of why my body would only have a minimal or short-term response to body work, and why all this stretching, meditation, alternative support, etc., was not effective, not just for me, but patients and clients. I could see then why all the medical tests that came back negative were not privy to the nervous system, and how frustrating this can be for people who live with chronic discomfort or pain, and how we, myself and the client, can support options for the body and the brain to resolve experiences that might be holding them hostage. As I journeyed through my own life, I was exposed to adventures in the outdoors that occasionally had negative effects, from decision-making to witnessing a small avalanche that my husband was caught in. I noticed how my brain was overriding my decision-making. Appeasement and lack of speaking up was not available when I was in more of my threat response system. I was unable to access healthier decision-making. This, in turn, supported my work to become a counselor, and I facilitated the first Mountain Muskox Mentorship Program, MMMP, chapter in Revelstoke. And for folks who aren't familiar with the MMMP, the Mountain Muskox Mentorship Program is a program set up specifically to support folks who may have experienced trauma or grief or loss connected in some way to mountaineering. So we'll be very interested to hear a little bit more about that, Catherine. Because we have such a small group tonight, I wonder if folks, if I stop sharing my screen for just a moment, if folks would like to introduce themselves to Catherine, anything that you'd like her to know. People have kind of shared where they're from already, but maybe just say hello, introduce yourself quickly, or say what brought you here tonight, if that's of interest. Sean, do you want to start with you, and then we'll pass it off to, just so everyone knows who Sean is as well?
Yeah, so my name is Sean J. Stevens, and I live, work, learn, and play on the unceded land of the Coast Salish Nations, and specifically the Katzie Nation, otherwise known as Maple Ridge. And that's often still not enough context for people. So it's about an hour's drive east of Vancouver, British Columbia. So yeah, and I am admin for Mental Health Wilderness First Aid, or as I affectionately call it, MWAFA. And I'm also a meditation teacher and mindfulness instructor. And I create content on some of the world's largest meditation apps, such as Aura and Insight Timer. And I also have my own private practice doing some coaching and accountability buddying.
Thanks, Sean. Ava? Hope I'm saying your name right.
Yeah, you are. Yeah, I'm Ava. I'm a counselor, student of master student at Prescott College in Arizona, and I'm a big wilderness person. I'm a paddleboard instructor as well, actually, in Bellingham, and hike guide, and otherwise just outdoor lover. But yeah, really excited to just hear about your experiences and just here to observe. Thank you.
Thanks, Ava. Carolyn, we'll just go alphabetically.
Hi, sorry to run out there. My kettle was whistling away, so I had to go turn it off. So I'm Caroline. I live in Nanaimo on Vancouver Island. I'm a sea kayak instructor. I started my own company last year for teaching. I'm also a guide. And yeah, I am really interested. I took Day's course, the Mental Health Wilderness First Aid, I think a few years ago, maybe now. But I'm really interested in like the aspect of making people feel comfortable in outdoor spaces, and like that can look and feel in many ways for different people. So I'm interested in that. And also many years ago when I lived in Ottawa, I took this thing called somatic yoga, and it was so impactful, like way more impactful for me than any other type of yoga I've done. So I'm interested in like the somatic. How does the somatic piece fit into what you're going to talk about? So yeah, that's me.
Thanks, Carolyn. It's great to have you back again. And Les.
My interest is generated obviously through search and rescue, but I'm also a member of the provincial CISM team, Critical Incident Stress Management team, and we wander the province doing intercessions when searchers turn, if you will, to the dramatic side. And it's a fabulous experience, and I have had a fair exposure to the Rolfing, so I a strong affiliation with that process. So thank you.
Awesome. Thanks, Les. That's interesting. We are having a CISM presentation in October. Is our guest speaker coming through is Chris Mushaminski, I forget how to pronounce his name, and Greg Miller are coming through from the SAR team over in the Columbia Valley. But yeah, very cool. Great. So I think without much further ado, I will turn it over to Catherine. I will just point out, as you got a notification when you came in, we are recording. So our intention is to be able to post this on our YouTube channel and social and all that kind of stuff afterward. I will also put out there the caveat that if at any time you as a participant, or Catherine, if you feel like, maybe you asked a question clumsily or you misspoke, or you're like, oh, I hope that doesn't go public, please just shoot us an email and we'd be happy to cut out something that you may have said in error if you like. But I want to invite folks to kind of speak and think freely. And last but not least, the views expressed by the guest speaker are not necessarily the views of Mental Health Wilderness First Aid, and they may be. So without further ado, Catherine, I think I'll turn it over to you, and maybe I'll just share my screen back for a moment if you want to tell us about any of these lovely photos that you sent me before the presentation, or introduce yourself more fully.
Yeah, no, that was a fairly thorough introduction of you, so thank you very much. It's a while ago since I've written that. Yeah, there's a little, there's always, of course, more that to fill in, but my background was in nursing, and I didn't know that I was going to continue on as a nurse because I was really quite unsatisfied with the job itself. And I did grow to quite love it by the end of my career. But I saw that it had some pitfalls. Same as in anything, there's always my somatic experiencing or therapy. Well, it's got some benefits and it also has some drawbacks. So I've learned over the years to take a little bit of the good and add it on to more of the good that I find. So one of the pictures up there is the Arctic at the bottom left. That is in Coral Harbor in a little island up quite north. Maybe 5-6 years ago. And then with my dogs, which is a great way for me to de-stress. I love cross-country skiing. And so there is a second one kind of hidden in there. And then my lovely husband, Steve, who here's my connection to outdoor. He was the gentleman who went to guiding school and I was the roommate at the time. So he's the person that I've done lots of adventures with, but I myself am not a guide. And then canoeing with the dogs. I love hanging out on this lake. This is Slocan Lake in the Kootenays. It's one of my favorite places to hang out. And then the top right is me skiing, and that's a -25 day. And I know that my window of tolerance for cold does not go below -25. So that's a little bit about those pictures. I'm happy if you want to open up the screen now. So a little bit about maybe the background of the somatic experiencing that was really helpful for me that I noticed between my Rolfing clients, and I'm going to I say this with patients as when I was nursing. The key between patients and clients is that a patient doesn't have choice and clients do. And even in my nursing, they told us that our patients should have choice. I just found that they don't. Even though we're trying to give them as much choice as we can. So I still would call patients in the medical field because I often found that they didn't have choice. And that was my way of maybe protesting. But what I would see is that there were a number of people who would come back with the same thing over and over and over again. And so from my Rolfing, which is the body work place of helping support the system to have ease, there was just something more in the nervous system. So it got me curious about Peter Levine, who had been a Rolfer, and I knew about that way back when. And I started studying it. And for me, it was extremely helpful because I had one client who I had spent so many hours with my elbow in her right shoulder. She saw me, physio, acupuncture for years and years, everybody. And it wasn't until I transitioned to SE work that right shoulder, that was her wing, that was her protection when things weren't okay when she was much younger. And so that got me into really shifting my work now into somatic experiencing. And I've also included internal family systems and movement. I do a ton of movement. My work is also informed by a gentleman, Daryl Sanchez, who's a psychologist and built this lovely tuning board, which is kind of like a little physio board that helps support the body with a teeny tiny bit of movement, not a lot, so that we can reorganize the proprioceptors that might be holding tight, might have a shock injury, whether that shock injury from a ball or words, our nervous system will react to it in threat. So if we start with maybe 1 billion or 2 billion years ago, do not quote me on the times. I'm not the geologist, but we were that little one-celled amoeba swimming in the ocean. We put down the freeze system first. That's what happens embryologically now today when we develop a baby. And it was also what happened way back when. So that little one-celled amoeba that's in the ocean, it gets something swimming by and it stops. Fantastic. It freezes and that, whatever it is, swims on by. So that's the beginning of our nervous system that keeps us safe. Then, let's say 1 billion years later, we started to grow teeth and claws and big get you out of trouble quad muscles, right? We have this whole system that gets us into flight and fight. So that's a really important part to notice that can go from irritation to big anger, the same as freeze can have a teeny tiny bit of freeze, and it can also go from something minor to also something quite big. Fantastic. This is what has kept us alive. And when we go back to grade 10 science, when we get 2, 4, 32 cells together to make a human, it's all about staying alive and passing on our DNA. So our whole system, as I say, is all about survival. And when we go into these survival modes, they're meant for short periods of time. They're not meant for days, weeks, months, years. So that survival technique that helps me as a child learn is fear-based, which is actually okay. I learn not to put my hand on the hot stove. It's hot, right? I also have family members tell me, don't do that. But I probably still have to learn for myself. I'm so glad I have a nervous system that has that response to take my hand away immediately. That's where we want to really have the usefulness of what's happened in our lives that maybe isn't so beneficial now, but at some point has sure had a positive response for you for staying alive. And that positive response might keep us for the next part of our social engagement to being a human. It might keep us out of that. So let's say maybe 1 million years ago, probably longer, that we had that our brains got bigger. We stayed with our family much longer than we would have, say, an ungulate that just is born and within a couple hours, it's, the deer is up and running away. Us as humans need to stay in relationship with these people so that we have these bigger brains. We have this body that's a bit different than probably 1 million years ago. But we have somebody who's constantly attuning and attaching to us and playing games and cooing with us and keeping us from discomfort. Here's where we are as little babies. We have this nervous system and it's really undeveloped. Right from even in utero, we have responses to things, but we don't have meaning to it. We have no idea. So when mom has maybe a bit of stress or something's going on, the baby's actually going to have some of that stress hormone that comes on. That can be part of the baby's nervous system into resilience and regulation. Got my little thing here. When mom's nervous system can have that window of tolerance to go into fight, flight, or it can go into freeze, but can come back out again, the baby actually gets the stress hormones and then feels it coming into safety. That hopefully starts to continue as the baby is born and cries because he or she or they are hungry. And so they can have a bit of discomfort and know that somebody's going to come and get them, right? Come and feed them, come and change their diapers. And so there are these places where that baby has this, no, I can be uncomfortable, I can come out of it. And it happens hundreds and hundreds of times a day. The other thing is peekaboo, right? All of these little games that we play with babies, that's part of regulation. That's all part of knowing that I could have some excitement in my body and then I can go to stillness, right? And anybody who's a parent or been around kids will see that kids will really do a good job of self-regulating at the beginning. They'll be in mom's arms and they'll peek out and they'll have a look at that kind of weird stranger and then they'll come back in again to mom, right? They're doing all of this kind of self-regulation constantly. So that's a healthy nervous system. That healthy nervous system can go into a place of lack of safety, but maybe can tolerate it a little bit longer this time, right? First day of kindergarten. Oh, those are some big, big energies, right? Going to the movie for the first time. There's all these new memories, all these new things that are being laid down. And here's this baby. Oh, it's okay because I know mom's right beside me, or I can call mom, or I've got my friend, or we've got this plan. So they can tolerate their blood pressure and their heart rate going up because they know that there's going to be a beginning, a middle, and an end to it. It's not all going to be bad. Where it might go a little bit awry is that if that little nervous system, and I'm going to start probably younger. It doesn't mean this is every, let's start out with also not every trauma is a traumatic thing. But if we have had it enough times in our system that somebody doesn't show up, we're going to blow through our fight flight and go into freeze pretty quickly. And the younger you are, the quicker you're going to blow through that. So if you're an infant and you occasionally get mom showing up, mom or dad or caregiver, with bottle or breast or food, and they're happy and they're attuned to you and they're laughing, great. And sometimes they show up and they're maybe silent. Maybe they have a flat face. Maybe they're not quite, they're keeping it in. And that's okay, but there's a response from that baby. And maybe sometimes the caregiver shows up and they just throw the bottle at you, right? So our little systems can tolerate that for short periods of time. That activation feels a bit too much the younger we are, and we'll go into freeze, which might look like a really happy child if it happens over and over time. You'll get teachers saying, you'll look back at your report card, great student, always quiet, always there. You might get curious to that person who says, oh yeah, I had this great childhood. I was, a good student or an okay student. But you might get curious because there's someone who is pleasing and they're in relationship with somebody biologically or in that area, whether it's biological, adopted, or fostered, however it might look like. But if that person is not safe, they have to stay in relationship with it because they're not a deer. They have to be there to be fed. I always forget Maslow's 5, but, shelter, food, clothing, those basic safety that we need, rules of safety, they don't have it. So they have to ignore some big behavior from a parent, from a caregiver, to stay in relationship with them. And as we're making meaning from all the new development part of our system of learning to walk and talk and feel things and hear things and all those big imprints that we know, we also get big, huge responses when our parents don't show up or there's a lack of safety. And that lack of safety might be ignoring, might be fighting, might be drinking, might be even just mom had to work a lot and wasn't there. It can also include C-sections or big threats. So you might have this great family, but you had a high fever, you had to have surgery, and something in there wasn't able to help attune and bring to safety. So we look at some of these patterns that may happen, and some people will start to, because quite knowledgeable, yeah, I'm somebody who likes freeze, or I'm somebody who likes activation. Our little systems throughout life are going to figure out ways to survive, because I have to be in relationship with this person who's dangerous. Okay, so my body goes, great, I got it. Fill up the moat, put up the drawbridge, get the soldiers ready to shoot, right? I'm going to have this body and I'm going to do this. Or I'm going to shut down. And I'm going to sleep a lot. Or I'm going to go to my room and read. Or I'm going to get very quiet. So that can be the beginning of our nervous system that has a hard time regulating being with people or certain activities. Because I don't know the difference between jumping on the trampoline for fun or the saber-toothed tiger. They're the same physiology. Does that make sense?
Catherine, it just occurred to me, do you want me to show the arousal cycle chart? Would that be helpful?
That'd be a great one. Yeah.
And did you say this is one of the resources we can share to folks afterwards?
You sure can. This one is definitely off of the internet, and I'll send another one from Sydney Badger, who's put one that she has adapted for more of the adventure folks.
Cool.
So let's look at freeze. Again, that's the very first part of our nervous system that develops in utero and has developed by evolution-wise. So it is a place that gets you safe. Cat and mouse, we still see that today. right? I can say, standing in front of a polar bear up north, my heart rate's going 300 beats a minute and my body's frozen. I know that I couldn't even think about moving, right? I know that I have to stay quiet. I don't need a parks pass to tell me what to do when I come into some of these big animals, because I have this built into my nervous system. It does it for me. So then our next part is then that fight flight, right? That's the next part of the evolutionary wise. And again, the next part in utero that gets laid down in our nervous system. We are really, it's a useful technique for us to have. And I might get irritated, but I might go into rage if it is part of me staying safe, right? I have older sisters. I know that the first few times they didn't listen to me saying, don't tickle, don't tickle, don't tickle. I eventually have to go to that place of, I'm going to fight and kick you because you haven't listened to me, right? So I'm glad that I have that on there. Now, do I have the deactivation in my nervous system to come back into social engagement so that I can be in relationship with them? Or I'm always on edge going, oh, are they just around the corner and they're going to tickle me, right? So here's where hopefully a family member would come in and say, that's enough, girls, stop. Stop tickling little Kathy Ann, what I was called back in the day. So I have in my system what we might call the file folder, or I've clocked that 1 tickling was okay, 2 ticklings was okay, 5 and tickling that didn't go very well. Every time my sister goes by me, I might hold my belly tight. I might hold my breath. I'm going to be on alert because that's a threat to me. Right? So we might do some of these things in tiny, tiny little bits throughout the day. So I'm going to ask you to bring it back to the next one, which is the picture of the parasympathetic and the sympathetic. There we go. And so this you can also have a look at to see where it affects your body. Right? So on our nerves, and I won't go into that, but the vagus nerve is what I'm guessing you all know. So that one, but cranial nerves, you can look at that on your own if you're interested in studying more. But this big old vagus nerve, the Latin word is wanderer. It's the vagrant wanderer that comes down. So it's all about keeping you safe. Brainstem, the back of the brain, which has, again, the important organ, or some people hopefully think it's important. But it starts there. So if I have a threat, I'm going to have some pretty quick physiological responses to a threat. So let's just use my siblings. I might see them, my eyes. They're going to stop and get big. My breath. That's usually the very first part of our nervous system to any kind of trauma, whether it's cold water or news or something, we hold in our breath. Again, great for short periods of time, not great for a long held part of our system if I'm always thinking I'm unsafe, which is why all of these meditation and breathwork courses are coming about to help us move through the state. My airway might also get constricted, which makes it hard for me to breathe. And then you can go into the liver, the blood vessels, digestive system. I'll jump down to blood vessels. My blood pressure might go up. My pulse might go up. But I might also be somebody who drops down into low, right? My free state. It's better for me to be in this death state because that's really helpful. I'm not going to be seen. I'm not going to be heard. Fantastic. Digestive system, that often goes awry right at beginning for children. And so briefly, if you have a child, this isn't always the case, but what I would see from my nursing, when you had a child who had an emergency C-section or mom almost hemorrhage and there was emergency, you would hear the stories afterwards. Oh, the baby doesn't sleep. The baby gets colicky. The baby doesn't digest. And on the polyvagal from Stephen Porges, you'll see that there's low tone dorsal and high tone dorsal. Low tone dorsal is breastfeeding, sleeping, kind of a very restful state where we can heal. High tone dorsal is immediate threat. So immediate threat is me walking out on ice, fall in, my body goes, hey, I'm going to keep you alive. So I'm going to stop every metabolic need that you need. And that would be lizard brain, correct, Dave? If we were to go to the lizard brain?
Yeah, that's what we call it in class. We just, I mean, it's just beautiful how much detail we're getting out of here. And I need to look at this so much more closely. In class, we keep it pretty simple. We mostly talk about like, hey, are you in your wizard brain? Your prefrontal cortex is operational, or are you in your lizard brain? And those more primitive, older parts of your brain are kind of taking over to help you survive.
Yeah.
But, yeah, I love this.
Well, so without thinking, your baby's little lizard brain is going to come on board without having you know it, and without even the parents know it, because that little baby who's in utero has a little nervous system that should be 140 to 180. Let's jump to the C-section, because the cord's wrapped around the neck or something's going on. And that heart rate either goes really high or goes really low. When that baby's born, it doesn't know that low tone dorsal breastfeeding is actually a safe state. It binds it and thinks it's death. So it has a great system that goes, I'm going to keep you from dying. I'm going to have you colicky. I'm going to have you not sleep. I'm going to wake you up. Really frustrating for parents, hard for that baby as well. But for me, it makes sense, like, oh, let's work with that, right? Even if that adult is somebody who's 55 or 75 or 6, we can still work with that nervous system that got shifted offline and got hyper wired to biology. So that, for me, when I do this kind of work, it's like, oh, that makes sense, that your body is maybe doing something that everybody else says is normal or should be fine, or you kind of get dissed away from, like, your nervous system is in threat. So let's see if we can do some of this work to move it out of threat. But it means I don't want you to always just like, oh, threat is now hypo. I want you to be like, oh, that's a threat. That's something I should have my blood pressure, have my heart rate, have my stomach stop digesting so that I can survive, but it can come back out of it again. And then just briefly, we probably, I won't go to the uterus, but urinary and bowels, we know that when we're in threat, we're going to drop our loads. Kind of the funny part, right? Great. If something is chasing me and I can run faster by dropping my load, good on me. That is a fantastic way. But if I'm just going to the grocery store and somebody drops a bottle and I drop my load there, that's where it becomes a problem. When it's disruptive to your life, that's when we want to see to do some work. So I'll get you to bring it back on main screen. So some of the things that we might do is, from this work, I might get you all to stand up. Welcome to put your cameras on, because this might bring some memories up. It might be kind of heavy for folks. And to get you to shake. Shake, 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 and shake everything. Move the head, whatever feels comfortable for you. Just let it out. And you can even add a big breath. You can add a to it. 30 seconds to 2 minutes is all you need. And then you come back to stillness. You pay attention. What feels different? What do you notice that's different in your body? So I'm going to invite you to take that moment and then come back to sitting. And I want to check in. How is everybody doing with the content? Anything sound familiar? Anything that you have questions about?
No, it's making sense.
Great. So I would like to add now the part of what we might do with a nervous system that's maybe hyper or hypo wired, that's getting us to do something. So I'm managing my system that may be hyper wired because I don't like the feeling that's inside that may have happened for whatever reason long ago. I might want to run every day. I might have to run marathons every year. I have to climb as many things. I have to jump off of bigger cliffs. I have to do some of these. Welcome, welcome. We've got Sage coming in. So here I am in my nervous system that doesn't feel comfortable inside, and I figured out a way to manage it. All those management ways, I always say sex, drugs, and rock and roll, sports, Ferraris, shopping, doing this, right? I might have a little bit of a tick that I do. Whatever it is it disruptive? Is it something that's in your nervous system that is normal for other people, but maybe is not normal for you? So we might look at how the body goes into that activation where it takes you offline and you can't be in your prefrontal cortex. So my work as a somatic experiencer, as well as internal family systems, I welcome every emotion, all welcome. And I also want you to be cognizant when you're in that emotion. So anger is often the big one. I never get angry. Oh, that gets me curious. How come? Well, I just, anger's not good, right? It's important for us to be angry in our lives because things happen that should make us angry. And it gets us to have a response to it. But I don't want to blow off the handle if something gets me angry and all of a sudden I'm ripping somebody's head off, right? So I want to be, let's go back to my siblings. I want to be in my body, see them, tell them exactly how I feel when they over tickle me, right? I want to have the energy. I want to have my blood pressure come up. I want to be able to stand on my feet and say, stop tickling me. It really doesn't make me feel good. I don't want to go into rage immediately. Same thing that might happen at work. So we can look at what takes us offline. That brings us to our prefrontal cortex. So this big part of the brain, I'm a little bit of an expert, not so much. I worked at a head injury home many years ago, and I could see how the brain goes offline when we have these long insults. But we might also have these short-term insults that happen when our prefrontal cortex doesn't have safety of engagement, right? Same as our body needs it from the Maslows or whoever we might want to theorize to say that we need the safety and love and care. Same thing with our brain. It needs a level of safety of engagement. And so when that goes off, I'm going to go into my midbrain. And so why I say midbrain here is because that's where part of the hippocampus and the amygdala and the few other things are. And I'm going to have the video before we get into the brain, because this is a great video to know that we don't need to know everything about the brain. We just might need to know while we're learning. If you want to go and learn all of these things, go right ahead and do it. But all we need to have is an understanding of that, I get activated or I go into freeze. We don't have to have all the fancy names. So I'm going to invite the video.
Hopefully the audio comes through well enough. Thoroughly enjoyed this video when Catherine sent it to me. Thank you, Catherine. I'll stop my video just in case that does help a little bit.
Oh, the audio is not coming quite through.
Sorry, Catherine, did you say something?
Yeah, the audio is not coming in. It's coming in glitchy.
Yeah, it might just be the music. Zoom sometimes cuts out background noise, and if it thinks the music is background noise.
Okay.
Let's see how it does with the actual.
Okay.
Well, the Cots and the Tempertones murk the glucoses and overclock the Merger chooses. Their staphylis cruciform and part of occurs together to mood slevity and appetity. So fourth frame shows dark vision and auditory slow perfection. Resumptive friction induces corresponding blip mortalizers, but that all comes under Kroner's electropulmonary self-medication, which you will underlie in our professor course. Now, resumptory friction and multicentric convolulators superless the alleviating Dutch immediately double Dutch, making contace and together to slip temperance and expectancy. A reflection inertia corresponds to Hugo Bavertz's supercredity valence multiplicatorry equation, E equals 2R. I'll say that again, E equals 2R, where R is the radiance of a home measure of the voluntary factor. Now, pavillary stems are parabolic and paraceltin, reflector lucidity overleases the homovesery and heterovand effect, so that neglectance of max atmospheric supercontraction causes structure mention of faction cavity there. So, don't eat them.
There we go. Still my favorite video.
Very informative.
So the brain. I am going to take this from Lisa Wimberger, who has adapted it from David Rock, who is a psychologist and is using the SCARF model in business, but also we can use it for anxiety. We can use it for any kind of counseling that we might want to work with if we are counselors, or even just noticing in our own systems. Because as we notice how our prefrontal cortex might go offline and adapt some ways to bring us back online, we'll also be able to see the person across from us and how they might be responding from a brain that's offline. Right? That's in midbrain. We're not going to have great decision making if we have a brain that can't see, hear, smell, take in information, right? And it's not very much that our brain goes offline. So if we were all walking with me down by the park and we're coming from the grass to the road, I have my dogs there and I may or may not have them on leash, but I know they're pretty responsive to me. But when we get to the road, I'll stop talking. I'll stop listening. My ears actually physically cone down to not hear human voice, but to hear dangerous sounds. So that there's a physiological change to our systems. And I will look for the vehicle. We'll go across the road and we'll start chatting again. In that very short period of time, I've stopped digesting, my heart rate's gone up, my blood pressure's gone up, my muscles have got all the hormones ready to react, right? I have all of this, I've coned my eyesight down, my ear muscles have literally coned down. I can only see across the road. And then as soon as I get across, I can come back in again. It's that minute that it happens hundreds of times a day that we go in and out of fight, flight, freeze. Right? So you might pay attention. I'm listening to a podcast. I do something. I have to rewind it because something just took me offline. Right? Some people live in this space all the time. They're looking for danger. They're checking out for danger all the time. Now, I know from one therapist did say it's 4 times a second. Our system is orienting for danger 4 times a second. It's a lot, right? So it's in our evolution biology that we want to stay alive. Now, if there's something from your past that might take you offline, well, this is where we might start to look at, is this something that always takes me offline? Yeah, let's stir the pot. When I call my mother, I go offline, right? So what can I do when I call my mother and I want to have a conversation with her and I don't want it to go in the same thing that it does? Here are some things that I might do. And this is the SCARF model, and we'll send this to you afterwards. But SCARF stands for status, certainty, autonomy, relatedness, and fairness. So let's start with status. And remind you all that this is all fluid. My status between everybody is going to be different. Between my husband, between my supervisor, between the clerk at the office, my status, all of that scarf is going to be fluid, and it's going to change all the time, which makes it unmeasurable, makes it kind of hard and tricky. So if my status goes offline because it feels unsafe, I'm going to go into my midbrain. I'm going to go into fight or flight. Okay? If I'm standing in line at the post office for 2 hours at Christmas, I have somebody cut in front of me. Well, don't you know who I am? Right? My status gets a hit. I'm quite angry. And I can't see that it's a little old lady who should cut in line, who should be in front, right? But I go postal. So we want to look at what we might do. So my certainty, I'm certain that person is next, then the person in front of them, and then me, my turn, right? I have certainty, and that just got a hit. So I go midbrain. And this might be, I go into fight flight or I go into freeze. I get really silent, and it's going to take me 2 hours. I'm going to have a nap to manage being at the post office because my brain got such a hit. Right? My autonomy, kind of my right to be there, but it's our autonomy. If anybody has a 2-year-old who is saying, I know, Sean, you've got some kids, they might like the favorite pair of pants. And you're like, here, I put out your favorite pair of pants. I'm not going to wear those, right? They're making their own decisions, doing all of these things, right? So your autonomy is going to be your ability to act on your own values and interests. Right? That's the important part of it. That might not get such a big hit for me at the post office, but it might get a little bit. And then my relatedness, how I relate to others. Who is in the lineup there, right? Maybe it actually does okay because they're all like, hey, Catherine, you should be next. That person, that was really bad. So I might actually come into relationship with them, or I might feel shamed. Right? Could go either way. Fairness, right? My fairness, that definitely gets a big hit. That's a capital F big hit. This is unfair. Somebody cut in front of me. So when we notice this, what do we notice about our own bodies? There's going to be a handout that you can fill out on your own, which I've taken from the Lisa Wimberger Neurosculpting course. But you can start to fill out some of these things. What happens when my midbrain gets a hit? Take any example that you might have and say, and work with it, right? And you can put the capital F or the little f on where you get scarfed. And it gets really helpful because you start to notice what's happening inside your body in relationship to what's happening outside your body. This is another big thing that we do with somatic experiencing. My interoception, so my information about what's happening inside my body, do I have access to it? Do I know when I'm hungry, when I'm full, when I've had enough exercise? When I haven't had enough exercise, how do I deal with these sensations when they come on, right? And if I go back to us being little kids and I'm watching my caregiver and they're not safe, I don't have any access to my insides, right? It's not in my best interest to eat my sandwich if I feel dangerous, to digest my food if I feel like I have a threat coming at me. So this is where this might be helpful for all of us, because I'm sure we've all gotten through life with a little bit of trauma. When do I go offline? What starts to happen? When can I come back? Is this a pattern that's been happening with me? So that shaking that we did, that's one of them, right? When you start to notice your body starting to go offline, you can do that shaking. If that's not available, squeeze. You can squeeze your fists, you can squeeze your big quad muscles, squeeze your back, right? That starts to change the habitual state that you are in, that going down the rabbit hole, whatever we might say. These are bottom-up techniques. So shaking, squeeze. Next one is just really good. brainstem is right behind us, and it's keeping track of all these important things: mouth, touch, smell, ears, digestion, part of our swallowing and airway. So when it feels like things are going off, the lip trill is really good. So I'm going to invite everybody to do this. It's 30 seconds. And we're going to vibrate. It's kind of like, horse lips. One more. Take a moment. What's different? Right? Even now, I can feel my own system. Like, here I am teaching, doing this, giving this presentation. Oh, I can feel a little bit of my back and my spine going up. Oh, what a nice break. Right? Come back into my own body. If that's not available, cold water in the face. Right? We're going to do the state change. If you would like the cold bath, the jump in, that's another great one. Right? Changing the state change so that you have control of it as well. And this is what I really like about breath, is that you can change your own system so that you have control of going into activation and you get to come out of activation. So that might look like we take a breath. Now, there's all kinds of breathing. I'm a little bit of an expert, not a lot, but there are some breaths that don't work for me. And I'd say the box breathing doesn't work for me. I don't really get it. It doesn't give me enough of a thing. So this is what I do. This is what I like for some of my folks. We're going to take a deep breath in, and we're going to hold it for up to 30 seconds. And I'm going to invite you to do this as well. We're just going to do this one once. We'll do another one. We'll do another one on top of this. But you get to decide how far you get to hold, and you get to notice your heart rate going up and your blood pressure going up and that panic kind of feeling, and you get to change it. So let's start now. Let's take a 3 sniff breath in, and it'll look like this. And then you'll hold it. So let's start now. So 3 breaths in. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14, 15, 16, 17, 18, 19, 20, 21, 22, 23, 24, 25, 26, 27, 28, 29, 30. Breathe. And again, let yourself notice what's different. Take your time. Why do we do some of these things? It's always good to check in if it's working. If it's not working, maybe we shouldn't do it, right? Why do I go to yoga class? Because they say it feels good. I keep going. Doesn't feel good. Don't do it, because there might be something impeding in the way, right? So that's one way that you can do that maybe is not as big as the shaking. The other one that you can do, and maybe kids will find this one a little bit easier, is that you're going to take a deep breath in, and then you're going to let it go and go down. So I'm going to walk you through this. So I'm going to invite you to take a deep breath in. You're going to make it big, 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 big. Hold it in. Yeah, big, big, big. And then you're going to exhale, and there's delight to the exhale. And then it becomes work again. And you're going to exhale. You're really working hard. You're going to feel all those muscles work hard. Get all that air out. And then you're going to let it come in. And there's delight for this little coming in. And it becomes work again. And you inhale. Big, big, you're huge. Come on, let's make it as big as you can. Fill it up, right? And then you let it exhale. Again, love that enjoyable part. It becomes work again. Oh, yeah. There we go. Let it all out. Good. And then now take one more big breath in. Big, big. Enjoy that part. Really big, really big, really big, really big. That's it. As much as you can. And then when you're ready, just come to rest. Feeling how your body might sit differently in the chair. How does gravity feel? Is there a little less anti-gravity going on, right? Pay attention to what's happening in your body. Is there less of you holding the world up on your shoulders, right? Can you feel your feet wherever they might be? Can you feel the tissues? Yeah. So these are state changes that you can do when you get scarfed. Yeah. Feel lighter. What else is somebody feeling? Yeah. The different digestion. Yeah. Yeah. When you can't do some of the bottom up, you might do some top down. So top down is going to be my brain thinks of something. So I might have a favorite picture that I like, where I've been. I might have this picture in my brain. I call them my postcard pictures that I might just think about. There's a favorite place that I have felt the most pleasant in, right? So I'm going to bring that on. I might bring on a video that I saw that was quite good, right? Or pictures of cats, right? So if I'm talking to my mother on the phone, I might bring my phone up, and as I'm talking to her, I'm like, oh, there's that picture. It's not going to take me, I don't want it to take me out of relationship with her, but it keeps me from going down that hole that I might have of feeling stressed or anxious or angry or however it might be that whoever I'm talking to, that might be in there. What else can I have certainty about? Well, I have certainty to know that my breath is going to show up. So I have the thought that, things are going downhill right now, but I know that my breath is going to come. Might be fast, might be slow, but I know eventually if my body says too much, it's going to pass me out and it's going to keep breathing for me, right? I have certainty. I have certainty that gravity is working. 100% certainty that gravity is not going to change unless I am going into doing something pretty silly like going to the moon, right? So bring those on that you can, whatever it is. I'm in a meeting. I know it is going to end at a certain time. That's something that you have certainty about. So those are the top-down ways that you can bring on to bring these state changes. You're going to change habitual reaction. The body likes things in small amounts. They don't like big, huge things. So when you do this every day, a little bit at a time, your body starts to change in reaction, right? It's really important that it's time and repetition that you put in that your body gets to change. So there's more to this with the Lisa Wimberger neurosculpting. I invite you to check out some of her own meditations. She does a lot of right brain, left brain to help the synapses of the brain work differently. So briefly, that might be if I were to left brain something, this is an exercise that I might ask you to do, or I would invite you to do if you would like to help your brain have these state changes. But you might have your left brain, which we know is linear. It would be a glass, is something that holds water, literally mined from whatever it is mined. Holds water, keeps it from spilling, keeps it hot, cold, however we might left brain say it, right? So a window holds in cool air, keeps out hot air. I can see through it. It's covered with a blind at times, and it's got a wood frame. That's my left brain. My right brain of the window is, it's a window to my soul. We can get very poetic about that. So if we take 5 things a day, and I might even say just 2, because as I was on holidays, I realized this is sometimes hard. As creative as I think I was, it's really hard to come up with those right brain things. So you can do a park bench, you can do a chair, you can do a plant, right? You left brain it, give it the very scientific or very, dictionary description of it. And then you do the right brain. This will be something to help navigate some of the things, how we might respond in life. So that also supports habitual change. Any questions? We can open up to the floor for a moment. Questions or response? Anybody would like to say if they like something, didn't like something?
I dropped it in the chat earlier, Catherine, but I noticed, so you were going through talking about like trauma and different parts of the brain and the nervous system and all that kind of stuff. And you were talking about the vagus nerve. And then you invited us to do that little shaking exercise. And I didn't realize it until we did the shaking exercise, that while you were talking, I was reflecting and thinking about all these things. But I was, I don't know, maybe like just very mildly dissociative while you were talking, right? I was like thinking about what you were saying, but I was kind of like applying it to my memories of different like things that I've been through or when my body has been in that trauma state or whatever. And it was relatively mild, but it was interesting that I didn't realize it until you invited us into the state change and doing the shaking. And then I was like, and you were like, what's changed? And I was like, oh, I'm not, I'm not there anymore. I'm here. So I just wanted to reflect that. I thought that was an interesting illustration of what the state change activities might do.
Yeah. 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 Yeah.
And Ava's dropped a couple things in the chat too. She says, love the example exercises and very helpful to feel it after you explain it. Yeah.
Mm-hmm.
I had a question from something that you talked about more in the beginning.
Mm-hmm.
And that's like, we were talking about like, I guess, ways that people sometimes just jump to like, I don't know if, I'm not sure if I'm getting the terminology right, but manage their fight or flight or freeze response. And like you were talking about mostly like physical things like tics in the body or like, I can't remember what else did you talk about drinking? I don't remember that.
Sex, drugs, and rock and roll. Yeah,
that's it. Sex, drugs, and rock and roll, and tics or something. But like I've often heard people, or more often heard people talking about like people doing more. I don't know what the term is, but like they control things instead, or they do stuff that's more inside themselves than externally, visible. And I'm wondering if you have if that's something that you've experienced in your work, if that's like another mechanism, and if you could speak briefly to like how those pieces fit in. And I guess you use the same mechanisms for dealing with them.
Well, I see that both. I see somebody's body shutting down. So they come in. So somebody might show up and be like, yeah, I'm constipated. I don't sleep. I'm anxious. Right. So those are things that happen in their nervous system that occur when there isn't the regulation. There isn't the ability to come in and out of rest and digest, fight, freeze. They get stuck in one or the other, or they're stuck with both. So the great example is the gas pedal, which is the freeze, is sympathetic, is stuck down with the brake, which is freeze. They're both on at the same time. And so that nervous system has a really hard time navigating the world. So I will see both of those things. I'll see people who have to manage, they have to go for a run. I live in Revelstoke. We have a lot of these folks that, but we also see it in emergency medicine, paramedics, high kind of dangerous sports, or I have to go big or go hard, right? Because I need to stay away from this sensation that doesn't feel good. And when I get some adrenaline or I get something else, it masks it, makes it feel better. So I hear a little bit of that. I see the physiological response of when somebody's system is not doing well. You'll see those kind of very clear. I get a rash all the time, or I get asthma, or I've had a heart attack, or right that to like a fibromyalgia would be somebody's system that's had to work really hard to stay safe. That almost always leads back to early childhood. Does that kind of make sense?
Yeah. Yeah, it does. Thank you.
And so here's a good example. I worked with somebody who had to run. She was compelled to run. There was no choice, because if she didn't run, she'd bite her children's heads off, right? She'd get angry. And she, over the 2 years that we worked, she's like, oh, I can go for a run and I can feel the breeze on my legs. I can enjoy it just for the running. Right? I even saw, because we live in a small town, but I even saw her gait shift. She was very kind of clunky walking. She was very body aware. But as her system came out of that fight, flight, freeze that she'd been in from her life, she could run. Her running time, she's a big racer. She's like, my running times are getting better. And I don't feel so awful at the end, right? So she would recover faster and she'd feel better and feel stronger as she was running. Does that kind of answer the question a bit?
Yeah. And it also answers like another thing I was wondering about, which is like some of this stuff that people might do as to mask is actually healthy as well and serves other purposes. But that illustrates it well, how like her running is still something that she enjoys, but she just enjoys it in a newer, freer way once So thank you.
Yeah. She's not disrupted by not running, right? If you look, running and exercise is great, right? These are things that we should do to help our stress. But if it's becoming something that disrupts my life, if I do or don't do it, that's when I'm going to say, same as a glass of wine, might be fantastic. Is 2 bottles a night really helpful? I don't know, right? Maybe it works for you. I'm not going to judge it, but I'm interested in why the person might need to do this, right? I don't care about the alcohol. I don't care about the drugs or sex, but I'm really interested in why they're compelled to do it. And so that's when we start to get curious about why you might be doing a certain thing. Yeah. And it's, safety. A lot of times it's safety and coming into regulation with another person. There's a great quote. I know, here's one way. Trauma is an unintegrated resource. Other people will say, Peter Levine and Bessel van der Kolk and Gabor Mate, it's not so much the trauma or what happened, it's the lack of an empathetic person who's carrying around you, right? So you have somebody who's had an accident. I see this many times. It's not so much the point of contact that happened. It's the person who showed up afterwards who wasn't very kind. And I have my own. I have a ski injury where I 17 and trying to impress this guy that I was going skiing with at Sun Peaks at the time. And it was icy. And I didn't pay attention to my skill. I had no, as I reflect on it, I had no idea what was happening in my body. And I was out of control. I was going down this hill. And all of a sudden I was really out of control. And so I did the old cartwheel and I got a concussion and I got hurt quite badly. So I had to be taken off by ski patrol. The paramedics were great. The ski patrol is great. The paramedics, Catherine, where is your pain? Where is it? I'm like, it's all from here down, right? But my face was all messy. Right? It was all banged up and swollen. And I get to the hospital and I thought the doctor had the same name as my GP. And I didn't know he didn't work emerge. So I was like, it's going to be my doctor. Lucky day for me. It wasn't, right? It was somebody who was miffed that I was brought into emerge for him. So he didn't treat me very well. So for me, the accident isn't my spine that was compressed. It was the lack of somebody showing up for me in that situation, right? The the bonus part or the positive part that came out of it was, as a nurse, I'm going to listen to what people say, regardless of what the test says. Oh, you have this pain here. Oh, well, okay. So I see that the x-ray says that it's not broken. Funny enough, he only x-rayed from here up and not down. So I'm just going to move. I'm in the sunshine, so I'm just going to move back a little bit here. But it gave me that awareness to go, I'm going to listen to a person. I'm going to pay attention to what's happening with them, right? Even though it might not look, right? Oh, you're panicking? Oh, well, it doesn't look to me like you're panicking, but for them, it's a panic, right? It's their emergency. So that's the really good thing that it came out for me. What else do I want to say about that? Well, I do want to get into the Mountain Muskox. We're going to shift gears a little bit here. So part of my work that I have done with my counseling is I supported Mountain Muskox Mentorship Program, which was out of, pointing just over there, Canmore. It started with a therapist who was seeing people individually and then created a group. So her group was around people who had, they knew somebody, they themselves had been injured in the wild. Sage, I'm going to come to your question.
Yeah, sorry, just before we go into the next piece, I was wondering if what was kind of said of like pointing out things that people are already doing as a way of like effectively coping. Is that a part of one of those actual like top down? So noticing that you're doing the horse lips, for example, as like this sighing after a period of stress, is some of it actually saying, hey, you've been regulating your system in a way, actually a form of top down of maybe showing how we are resilient or showing that we are having those? I don't know if that makes sense. The top down or the bottom up or top down are ways that you can start to tune into your system and change that state behavior. And then so then of course you're going to notice that there's a difference. So yes, paying attention, because why do it if it doesn't feel good? Does that answer your question? Yeah, I think so. So it's like drawing some attention as well to the things that you are doing to change your state. Okay, awesome. Yeah. Thank you.
People will walk into my room and they're like, I'm not stressed. And then when we do some work around it, maybe it's on the table doing some touch work or bringing awareness of like, oh, I've been carrying a lot of tension in my body, right? And then that's where we deal with the anger or the sadness or that comes up from it. But they then have some awareness of what's happening in their body. Yeah, very briefly, I had a childhood that had walking on ice. I got through it, but there was part of me still as an adult. I have a great husband. I have a great career, did all of these things. And there was still my body, as I call it, walking on thin ice. Or when we might notice it, I'm wearing high heels on a frozen pond, right? I was doing this. So when somebody actually, during my somatic training, put their hands on me, I'm like, what's that buzzing? She's like, oh, that's just the freeze coming out of your legs. We're noticing that, right? Right. So somebody else was able to touch me and I was like, oh, that's what that is. Yeah. So going, and I'm more than happy to talk if you want to send me emails or chat another time. I can give you some resources for this. But the Mountain Muskox I supported last year, and it was a group of people. It was parents and guides and some people affiliated with this program. And so we met once a week and would talk about, well, here, let me back up. Story preserves trauma. So we wouldn't talk about, but we would talk about ways that we might be responding to our trauma. I like to talk about my trauma, but as I tell it, it reinforces exactly all those hormones, all that lack of breath, all of that holding my body when I retell the story. So the goal was to do the healing without having to tell the story. And that is noticing my body. When I just even bring up the idea of that happened, accident, car crash, whatever it was, near drowning,
I don't even have to say it. My body goes into it. So what do we notice, right? We pay attention to some of our body that's already going into that pattern of story. And we would take one little piece of that. So the same thing that I kind of taught here, we did in the MMMP. And through that, people realized when I tell my story to myself, I re-traumatize me. And I just realized that I verbally vomited all over another person. And now they're going, this happened to you, right? So it was all about learning how to regulate, how to notice our own system, how to notice when other systems are out. And then when we've had something big happen, what do we need to do? We need to connect, right? Maybe I need to connect with a coworker. Maybe I need to connect with family. Maybe I even need to connect with a mental health professional because what's happened is too much. So, it was all about how can you find resources for yourself? How can you mobilize from that? What can you do that's different than that's happened before? And so it was a whole program, which I based, because it was new, it may be changed, but I think it's now hopefully moved on to other people who are taking it on. But Resilient Minds, so I didn't give you that resource. That's a really good program that therapists, the wheel's already made. So if you're interested in teaching this to other people or learning about it yourself, the Resilient Minds is a great course. And it was set up for policemen, paramedics, like 911 EHS responders, and who's your 911 caller? Anyways, the dispatchers. And so my husband works in forestry now. He uses it now for wildland firefighters. Right? So they changed it to fit the wildland firefighters so that they can have somebody to talk to. They can recognize it in somebody else. There's a lot of suicides that happen in guiding and in police and in fire, right? Structural and wildlife. So we want to start to see if somebody else doesn't have access to what's happening in their body and they're drinking a lot, they're having risky behavior, they're doing things that is disruptive. Can we help support them find a way, right? And I really want, this is for my internal family systems, all of those things that might be disruptive, again, having no judgment and neutral about it because it is saving my life. My drinking, my risky behavior, my whatever it is, has a positive intent for me. Maybe not for long. Maybe it does have some health effects, or maybe not for the people around me, which is really hard to take when it's such big energy around you. But my anger or my sullenness or my drinking has a positive intent to keep me safe. And so when I have had my third marriage breakdown or I've gotten fired again, I finally go and see a therapist who doesn't just say, Catherine, go to AA and take these meds. Because I will have my system that'll say, okay, I can stop drinking. Maybe the first go around, I stop drinking and works out. But I become a dry drunk. I will take whatever it is that I've used in drinking. Now I fix cars, or now I crochet a lot, or whatever it is that I do. I have a compulsion to still do something. And when we get to what was so helpful about drinking, what was going on when you started drinking, right? When we get curious about whatever it is, tapping, right, biting my nails, whatever it is that was going on, and we get curious about it, it came on for a reason. It became part of my developmental system that I had access at the time because I couldn't run away, I couldn't fight, so I figured out another thing. Bessel van der Kolk puts it really nicely, is that when you're two and you don't have a safe caregiver around you, you have to work really hard. You can't run to your drug dealer. You can't run to the liquor store. You can't buy a Ferrari. You got to work really hard. And so that's your system working hard. Yeah.
Catherine, I just want to pause for a moment to just give you a time check. We've got about 8 or 9 minutes left. And I do like to have a kind of a formal wrap at 7, because I want to honor that everyone's kind of had in their mind that they'll be here till 7. So we'll have a formal wrap then. If folks do want to stick around for a few more minutes after that, then I'm open to that. But I'll leave the rest of the time.
I was just going to say, I think it's time for some questions. So I'd be happy to answer some questions.
Yeah, I can. I really liked I really loved the breathing exercises you showed us. I've been toying with the idea of getting into learning more about somatic breathing for my with my practice, and because I do a lot of breath work in mine, and I also feel a little personally attacked because I like box breathing. So.
But it doesn't work for everybody, right? I always put that as an option.
It's actually just a really good illustration of like having as many tools in your tool belt as you can possibly have. Because I find like you said, like some things just don't work for some people, and like, while some people may really love box breathing as an example, other people may resonate with something else more, right? So
the origins of box breathing are for Marines to go down under and scuba dive, right? So it's a great way. Once you get your system regulated, what a great way then I'm going to go into this stressful situation and I have only so much air in my oxygen tank, so I have to use this skill, right? Yeah.
I guess if I remember correctly, Sage, I think your background is silviculture. Is that right?
So a bit of agriculture, but currently in counseling.
Right on.
But grew up with background in agriculture and farming, and grew up on the farm.
And Maddie, I think you popped in after we got started too, but we had done a little check-in just to see kind of who was in the room. But yeah, just curious, I guess, what folks are reflecting on kind of from your own backgrounds. How are there little memories that pop up of like how this might be a useful lens, or how it might apply in the future, or something like that?
One thing actually that does connect in just my putting in the piece where I really relate to what was said about Mountain Muskox, and what was probably the connection to silviculture was I had an opportunity to go do trail building 4 or 5 years ago, and at that time was really suffering from burnout and was completely overwhelmed, and it was just a job. And there was no conversation about mental health or anything. And it really did actually become because of the physical demand. I was really out of shape. I was really out of my body. I was really quite isolated, and being out on the land and pushing so far past my limits and having to really go into my body and know when my feet hurt and know what my breathing was doing. It was one of the most therapeutic experiences I've had, and the guy that got me into it was just a friend who needed somebody to carry a backpack up a mountain and knew I didn't have anything going on at the moment. But I really appreciated that as well of just seeing how we have these adaptive responses that there's a functional piece to so many of these things we might not be attuned to, and part of it was actually noticing that some of my depression or drinking or those things was a really logical response to being overwhelmed. And it took an experience that pulled me out of it to have something that went, okay, what else could fill that function? So I appreciated that.
Yeah. Those responses that might be maladaptive, they saved your life, right? Really want to stress that. They saved your life. And now we have some awareness. What can we do to do things differently? Yeah. We have Maddie. I think you're from India, correct?
That's right. That's right. Hi. Sorry, I joined kind of late just because of a bit of the time difference. I didn't realize.
Welcome.
Yeah. So I just kind of what I heard. I really like the concept of the state change and just kind of recognizing in terms of when your brain goes offline. And I just kind of relate to it because a lot of times I know I'm going offline. For various reasons. It's just that I still kind of push my brain to kind of go in a certain way and not give it a rest. So I just really like just the word and kind of recognizing and where you are and kind of moving forward. So I Yeah, I think that just kind of really kind of just in terms of state change. So
Yeah. It's a good one. It's a great one to have, and you can use it all over the place. You start to notice it.
True. Thank you so much for sharing.
Yeah. And Les, I do agree that holotropic breathing is a huge piece in therapy, and that is used more as a technique to access maybe that subconscious part of the brain, right? So that might be used with a therapist on a one-on-one situation. But these little breath changes that we can do without it's free, right? Those are free things that you can do. But yeah, very powerful, very powerful.
Thanks.
Super powerful. Yeah. Well, the spiritual, that's a whole other conversation on the spiritual side of breathing and therapy. Yeah.
And just wanted to echo again what was said about state changes and just bringing attention to that. And I'm currently working with youth a lot, and emotional experiences and overwhelmed is this mysterious thing that I'm just overwhelmed. Yeah. And then that's the only thing that there's awareness of is just, this is too much. Yeah. And just thinking of the real value of that slowing down of even with those breathing exercises of, hey, you just had a small controlled experiment of noticing a state change. Where else can we notice that in our life and in our day? And really appreciated that reminder because it's so tactile to, okay, how can you take steps when you notice your state changes, right?
Yeah. And that overwhelmed quickly, you know that there's probably a lot of dysregulation at home. Yeah. So they don't have a lot. Their window of tolerance is pretty narrow, what they can take. Yeah. It's like me skiing at minus 25. I don't have a lot of window of tolerance for stopping and staying. And it was a great experience to see how quickly my emotions went into fear and anger, like very quickly, right? So in that threat space with cold, my brain was very quickly offline. Yeah.
Reminds me a little of actually we're going to take a break for summer, but in September, our next upcoming guest speaker is Aaron Lyons, who's a de-escalation trainer. And I've heard him speak a little bit before on de-escalation, and he talks about something similar to what you're saying, Catherine, which is about state change, or he calls it changing the script. Like when you notice escalation happening or somebody getting into a fight mode is I think the parallel here. He talks about like the skill of doing something slightly unexpected, right? Or just introducing a new skill, or do you want to come over here? Or like just changing the pathway that it's kind of set on.
Yeah.
So, yeah.
Yeah. No, as we conclude, the last piece is orienting towards pleasure or orienting towards fun. So one of the horse lips was, it was also pretty fun, right? It gets the 2-in-1. So do those things every day, right? Find the things that are working, find the things that are fun. That's what you also want to bring in. You want to let your brain know, yes, some scary things have happened and they don't happen all the time.
This has been wonderful, Catherine. Thank you so much. I have lots of notes that I'm very excited to continue to reflect on. And I always learn so much from our guest speakers. You know, I ostensibly do this for other people and for our little community to continue to grow. And I just find that it's a way of supporting my own selfish motives of learning and growing more myself. So yeah, thank you so much for being here and sharing a bit of your story and your expertise with us. And if folks do want to get in contact or they have kind of follow-up questions or anything, is there, what's the best way for them to do that?
So Balance and Renewal Therapy is my website.
.ca or .com or?
.com.
Gotcha. I just popped that in the chat for everyone.
Yeah. Or Alan, and you can find me in Revelstoke. And so I do online as well as in person. Yeah.
Great. Yeah. And you said it's a small town.
It is a small town, but it's great. I have folks from all over the place. So yeah.
Beautiful. Well, thank you so much for being here. I'm sure everyone will join me in offering a round of applause. Really appreciate it. I'll invite us to have a formal wrap and an end. So thanks so much, everyone, for your time and being here. Feel free to come back and check out our next guest speakers. We also have, spread the word if you know anyone who might be interested. We're doing our first open public in-person course since early 2020, and it's happening in Vancouver in August. And it's also our very first 40-hour course. So we're doing 40 hours. We've expanded a little bit on the upgrade course. There's also a 16-hour option. You can do just the first 2 days, or if you already have the 16-hour, you can do just the last 3 days. But yeah, we're going to spend a week together in Vancouver and get really integrating into some of these topics of supporting mental health for other folks. So yeah, be in touch, and we'll have a formal end. So thank you, everyone.
Thank you, everybody, for showing up.
That was wonderful. Thank you so very much.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you.
Thank you. It was amazing.
Thanks, Catherine.
Thank you so much.
Thank you. Thank you so much. Thank you.
And you're also welcome to go and enjoy pleasure.
That's right. Yeah.
It's summer.
Yeah.